On Halloween, we celebrate the endlessness and death of rebirth, originating from the Celts before their pagan rites were converted into a new religion. We sing and dance with the dead, we curiously peek into the worlds beyond. And we do so with joy and an open mind for all things sublime, dark and stormy. For all things, well, Gothic. Once a year, the recently deceased join us to celebrate across the veil. Once ancient Romans and Celts used sacrifices as an offer to the spirits. A tradition that has been watered down to pranks or tricks played by the living and blamed on a mischievous entity.
As to be expected, the Victorian era was of course very much enamored with this reimagining of ancient drama, but instead of sacrifices and death rituals, they settled for lavish parties and frivolous divination games. A pumpkin was often used as the invitation to a party, so if you found a carved jack-o'-lantern on your doorstep, there was usually a note attached inviting you to be at a certain Halloween party at the strike of witching hour. Decorations were often made of warm harvest colors such as gold, red and orange. There was of course the wearing of Halloween masks. They were known as fiddle faces, worn to ward off evil spirits or to be anonymous as one wreaked mischief. There would be of course the spooky story time where the party people would gather in a circle, each trying to creep the others out with their own ghost story.
Which leads to the old Irish legend of Stingy Jack. Right? Stingy Jack successfully tricked the devil for his own greed and gain, and at the end of his long life, he was banished from both heaven and hell, and as a result, he was doomed to walk the earth for eternity. So at night, and especially around about Halloween time, when spirits are at their strongest, people would carve out a pumpkin and put candles inside it, because apparently this would be like the same as what a cross is to a vampire. It would keep him at bay. It must have been a pretty dark spirit. So yeah, hence the term jack-o'-lantern, a lantern for Jack. So you could say that Stingy Jack was literally a Marav Bio, which is the living dead. So he was the original Walking Dead, the original Living Dead, the Irish version of a zombie.
Victorian Halloween costume was usually related to the supernatural. So there were vampires, witches, ghouls, ghosts and devils. They were quite popular. And the pumpkin, which was of course a modernized version of their Celtic roots.
There's a short story by Peter Tremaine. It's about a witch who basically reanimates the corpse of a priest to wreak vengeance on these British soldiers that killed the whole village. And it's a great story. It's a story from like 200 years before. British soldiers murdered and raped a whole village of people and murdered this priest. And she uses the priest as a vehicle to wreak vengeance. And this priest literally tears the British army into pieces with his savagery. It's just a great story. And when I read it, I just thought, now I know where Pumpkinhead got its idea from.
Beyond all the costumes, tricks and spooky stories, the main focus of the night was matchmaking. What else? In the 1920s, Halloween changed for the first time with pre-designed masks for sale. In the 1950s, we were introduced to Halloween-themed candy and horror movies on TV that ran all night. And only since the 1960s we can have all that and watch Halloween specials specifically crafted for the season.
Honey, don't get too close. You'll ruin your eyes.
Jack-o'-lanterns, gather round and watch the magic pumpkin.
A ghoul creature from the realm beyond, grown from your local pumpkin patch, only awakened to be puppeteered by a deranged human, is pretty spooky. There are strong similarities between the pumpkin monsters and their accompanying witchcraft in these films. There is a summoning by rage or a thirst for vengeance through ancient black magic. There is murder or the desecration of a grave. There is an ancient legend no one bothers to explore or try to understand. And there's the boundless nature of the uncanny. So spread your bed sheets and let's overdose on mystical, bewitching pumpkin movies.
In the movie Trick or Treat, Sam is a very cute little freak. He's very straightforward in his lore. He's the protector of Halloween tradition and the realm of the beyond. Sam is summoned by the natural magic that comes with Halloween, and he set out to visit the ones who have lost touch with the Halloween tradition. And he will punish everyone who disrespects the original traditions of Halloween. Sam knows that spirits are not unholy, but part of the world, albeit on another plane, and should be respected. If they are ignored, they can be animated by wrath and rage, or even seeking revenge, which makes them a perfect tool to escalate revenge for its human summoner. Pumpkinhead's a supernatural golem spirit linked to the pumpkin magic and blood sacrifice. He is awakened to act out revenge on behalf of the heartbroken father to avenge the death of his little son. There's no recurring or annual curse that needs to be renewed, and it appears as a demon, a tool for vengeance. And instead of bringing Lance Hendrickson's son back from the dead, the witch sends the local Halloween golem.
And there are definitely, spirits of vengeance in Irish mythology. Whether it's an invention or not, I don't really care. But I do think it is based in something. I really do.
The summoner, aka Lance Hendrickson, and Pumpkinhead are definitely soul-bound. Throughout his killing spree, Pumpkinhead adopts similarities from his summoner. They seem to resemble each other more and more in the looks and movements, and I assume that kind of magic is sort of fueled by human energy, in a way. I think once the summoner dies, Pumpkinhead returns to the earth, and that is what reminds me more of the golem than a biodiverse revenant. The witch's ritual here requires payment, as in literal jewels or jewelry, and in the form of blood from the summoner and the dead child. There are magical incantations from the witch herself, who is clearly magically knowledgeable and very strongly linked to nature.
Pumpkinhead is just pure black magic. It's just witchcraft. It involves the whole town. It has that sort of Wicker Man feeling to it,
Pumpkinhead reminds me a lot of an almost Lovecraftian or even dinosaur-esque appearance. There are zero human tropes in there, with its elongated limbs, its tail, the misshapen head when he's first brought to life. And there's a wildness to him, an untamed and almost feral vibe.
Yeah, they do have like an elemental kind of like, I guess pumpkins, they have very earthy, little rooty. It is kind of like yeah, I do agree. I could see someone like Guillermo del Toro doing an amazing pumpkin-based creature, but it could easily be in that world, couldn't it?
There's an element of sort of body horror to it that kind of appeals to me, because in the case of Pumpkinhead, somewhere along the line you realise that they have to use a corpse to create this demon.
I think Pumpkinhead is immortal simply because he can be summoned again and again, even after his old summoner has died. He can just be regrown, basically.
Got a witch digging a grave. I mean, the imagery is just amazing. And, you know, a blood spell, but the person that wants to do the vengeance has to cut themselves and literally use their own blood to invoke this demon. And I think this is all grounded based in pagan rituals, I think, you know, if I'm not mistaken.
The summoner has to dig the creature up from the pumpkin patch at the strike of midnight. The summoner also has to carry hatred in his heart to be worthy of Pumpkinhead's service.
A lot of horror has this lack of justice. It shows humanity in a way that I think a lot of people don't like to think about it. What are we capable of as human beings? And you may see someone do something and think, oh my God, it's terrible. But it's like, yeah, but with the right motivation, we will do some of the fucking most insane things out there, right? And the fastest way to create a monster is to put them through monstrous things, right? And for Lance's character, what's more fucking horrendous than losing his son? If you want certain things to happen, and maybe you haven't got the power that's needed to do it, but even if you had the power, could you do it? Could he have just killed all of them after what happened to his son? Maybe the driver he could have. Everyone else? Don't know.
It was a cyclical thing, and that he was to eventually become the very thing that he conjured up.
There's a Southern Gothic element to this. We'll see that trope return a lot in the other movies we'll talk about. In Nightmare Before Christmas, there is the Pumpkin King. He only appears in the graphic novels, and he enters Halloween Town when Jack Skellington is much, much younger. So this is way before Tim Burton's movie. He is clearly seeking a successor so he can finally retire. The Pumpkin King strikingly resembles the scarecrow we see in the movie with his gnarly wooden hands and quite literal pumpkin head. He seems kind of ancient, with spiders eating away at him, and maybe he decays, and that is why he needs a successor, which we see then in the Nightmare Before Christmas movie. The magical aspect of the Pumpkin King is that he seems to control the wind, which is something Pumpkinhead is able to do too. And just like Pumpkinhead, the Pumpkin King retreats in the end to the local pumpkin patch / graveyard at his end of tenure. That's probably where you will find the best pumpkins in the area, I guess. Pumpkins need a lot of nitrogen to grow, so they basically grow themselves. And you know what else is high in nitrogen? There's a lot of good old-fashioned black magic and witchcraft added to Washington Irving's original short story, which was simply a spooky mystery. There's the good witch in Katrina Van Tassel who knows protective spells. There is a literal witch creature dwelling in her cave deep in the woods. There's Lady Crane and the mother of the twins who are both accused of witchcraft and punished for it. And finally there's Lady Van Tassel, the only evil, purely evil witch who acts out her revenge on the people she thinks are responsible for her losses and misfortune. So you see, witchcraft is ever present in Sleepy Hollow. All of these magical women are children of nature, drawing symbols on the ground and collecting specific flowers. The way witchcraft is enacted in this movie here is not explained at all, but by rewatching it for the 86th time, I'm not even joking, I managed to make out some herbs and sigils on the floorboards on the abandoned mill when Lady Van Tassel conducts her spells, and they're quite similar to Katrina's protective spells. There is blood and incantations. There's the occasional sacrifice, and of course the Hessian severed head, which serves as a magical summoning tool.
I think that in itself gives power to whatever folklore is created, you know. And I think it's only strengthened because their experience outside of those communes, well, that's all they know, right? So if they've grown up being told that, oh, this happens on this night, and blah, 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 they're gonna fucking believe it, don't they?
It has a campy tone. I mean, it knows exactly what it is and how to summon a sort of comedic horror. But there are moments that are indeed a bit fucking bleak.
You know, there are themes in this of transformation, you know, like as in Harvest, his own eventual transformation, themes of hubris, black magic, dark magic, comeuppance, you know, there's poetic justice as well.
And on top of it all, Hessian is also puppeteered by his human summoner, just like in Pumpkinhead.
It's interesting why it's the pumpkin, because there's this image of, you know, rows of pumpkins growing in a field, you know, that's really weird imagery.
It's easy to pass off heinous acts if it's not you doing it. But we know when you work on the door for a long time, or when you go to places where there's a lot of violence, you see a whole other side of human nature, you know.
I love the mixing of green pumpkins, using dead people, you know, to conjure up something.
Religious belief holds a prominent fear over this secluded society, making the Headless Horseman a demon from hell instead of a mystical ghost or even an ancient curse. It's quite similar to the legend of Stingy Jack, who can enter neither heaven nor hell and forever wanders purgatory. Which is interesting, since in Sleepy Hollow the local church does not provide safety. Tim Burton's Headless Horseman is a fantastic movie monster, and Ray Park's portrayal of him in the action scenes is out of control. It's wild, filled with drama. It's very similar to the Disney version. It emphasizes the feralness of the topic, of the idea of the pumpkin revenant. He becomes totally unleashed and unfiltered force. There's a very good example in the short story. I only have the cheap thrift shop version, but yeah. So I'm reading you a tiny excerpt from this. A drowsy, dreamy influence seems to hang over the land and to pervade the very atmosphere. Certain it is, the place still continues under the sway of some witching power that holds a spell over the minds of the good people, causing them to walk in a continual reverie. They are given to all kinds of marvelous beliefs, are subject to trances and visions, and frequently see strange sights and hear music and voices in the air. Wow. Similar to another movie we're gonna talk about is that the catalyst to the entire event in Sleepy Hollow is based or fueled by legends and telltales. Another ancient curse is in the movie Dark Harvest. So every Halloween, Sawtooth Jack, or the October Boy as he's called in the novel, needs to be prevented from entering the local church before the strike of midnight. Otherwise the town will be punished with poverty, the harvest being doomed for the next 10 years. It actually reminds me of Shirley Jackson's The Lottery somehow.
The whole Halloween thing is used in Dark Harvest. It's not his hubris. He's a victim. October Boy, is it? Yeah. So he's a victim. The hubris is from the town elders.
I mean, that opens up more questions about the nature of humanity, right? And about you know, if we if that is the monster and the monster's doing our bidding, then who is the real monster, right?
The church is usually a gathering place for the townies, just like in Sleepy Hollow. And the question here is if there is something that makes Sawtooth Jack not just pagan, but also unholy.
A lot of paganism and a lot of Christianity, they're more similar than they like to imagine. Look at like the Passover. So once a year, you know, they'll be passing around the wine to represent his blood, bread to represent his body. Now, if that was a bunch of other people and they were like, we're going to pass around this, and this is the body of whatever it is, and this is the blood of whatever, I'd be like, what the fuck are you doing? So it's all about how shit is framed, right?
Again, we see the murder of an individual linked to that blind adoration of tradition that is neither truly understood or willingly explored by the villagers. It's just accepted.
The fact that there's a cyclical thing to the story. So the next person that wants to, wreak vengeance on someone is essentially using the last person that did it. And that's the curse. I just love that, you know? It's sort of sad and beautiful and scary at the same time.
What's interesting is that, like the other Halloween ghouls, the October Boy returns for the day with the help of actually pagan magic. It's never a Christian ritual. It's not Lazarus-esque at all.
I think in Dark Harvest, maybe a bit more, I don't know, more possessive type of thing going on there, I guess, as opposed to being just an actual tool.
Transformation is also part of the whole thing, and it's all very primal, isn't it?
Another interesting element is that annual outburst of violence, of menace, of darkness, a fertile ground for black magic and curses to prevail. Sounds a lot like the creature's not necessarily the bad guy here, but a soul prevented from its well-deserved rest.
It's a mixture of ritual and kind of weird surgery, almost like growing it like a plant on the cross, like a scarecrow, and waiting for it to sort of reach fruition, which I guess is sort of part of it, the harvest. That's what it is, isn't it? It's the harvest, which in a way is very, brings it back to the whole pagan thing, isn't it, I suppose. And I think the pumpkin is become sort of representative of that, within Halloween, even though it started off as a turnip, but still, pumpkin is much more interesting to look at.
I actually prefer the creature design in the movie to the books. It's a bit more closer to the uncanny because it is more human and very eerie, given that a pumpkin is grown on top or instead of a head on the lanky teenage boy's body. It's quite creepy.
I think with Sawtooth Jack, it had to be a certain physical presence. Sawtooth had to be wiry and fast, It didn't necessarily have to be a big thing. It had to be just humanoid, which made it kind of horrible because even though you don't know, you sort of suspect, I know that this in some way one that died, you just feel it, Pumpkinhead, it had to be huge. It had to be, not only did it have to have a big head, but it had to be formidable and strong and big,
It's interesting how, again, literature from across the ages will paint things, depending on what century that book was written in, or that poem was written in, will show you exactly what was going on in society at that time. Certain things that are painted in a bad light, and that may shift. But that's dependent on who was the controlling power at the time, right?
In all of these cases, there is no way back, no return to your old ways, because all of these witches are willing to sacrifice something or someone. And sometimes there's no price high enough you'd pay to soothe your soul, if you still have one then. Creatures like these, beings of all Hallows Eve, fascinate us because they are neither fully human nor animalistic, but all unnatural. Things that shouldn't exist outside of Halloween.
I like an elusive witch deep in the woods. Everyone knows about her, no one talks about her, and we only pay her a visit in a moment of darkness. Sounds pretty Halloweeny to me.
But not all is dreary around spooky season. There is quite the enchantment and nourishment that comes with the harvest season as well.
Yes, I absolutely do celebrate Samhain, and I will bring pumpkin magic into those celebrations. Well, for Samhain being the celebration of the last harvest, but also that veil between worlds begins to thin. And that's when traditionally Celtic Irish would have used things like turnips to create jack-o'-lanterns, where they would have used the pumpkin to offer protection and ward off unwanted spirits. But over time, as our Irish people moved over to the Americas, and then they found pumpkins and they offered better kind of vessel for those jack-o'-lanterns, and they've made their way back over to the UK. I think it's brought that connection with spirit. Samhain is very much a festival, it's a harvest festival. It's the third harvest of the year, and it's the last harvest of the wheel of the year. Samhain for me incorporates that time of slowing down, because we're heading fully into autumn at this point. And the pumpkins, they bring quite a big energy, although they come in different sizes. When I incorporate them into my Samhain kind of rituals, it's very much from a place of gratitude, prosperity, and honouring kind of what has come before, rather than it being about how they're traditionally seen, which is to ward off evil spirits. I've not really had that experience in my practice. I have had some peculiar experiences with spirits, but nothing where I felt like I needed to use the pumpkin to ward them off. I kind of use it more as a way to ground with something that's come from the land. I like to use pumpkins to adorn my altars. They bring in that beautiful rich orange, which is very representative of the seasonal change. So obviously autumn, from a kind of pagan Wiccan background and ethos, is that time of release and letting go. Often we can associate it with kind of that kind of death, because leaves are dying and falling. But yeah, autumn to me is never a time of death and darkness. It very much is slow down. It's rest, recharge. Yeah, you agree. Also reevaluate. I actually find this time more reflective. More time to kind of go, right, we've planted, we've now reaped all those rewards. What worked, what didn't, how do we move forwards? It's giving you the resource and the permission to slow down. They're quite important in terms of sustainability for the colder months, because we can keep them for up to about 3 months. They say about 90 days if we don't, obviously if we carve them, that changes and they will rot away. But having the pumpkin available to eat, and I like to eat with all of it. And again, that's part of the magic. Food and herbalism and that kind of resourcefulness is really important. My kids and I, we do like to do some carving of pumpkins that we can put around the house. And that is just to Obviously, if you're opening yourself up to connection with spirits, there's always the potential that you might get some unwanted guests, and then the pumpkin's there to ward off any unwanted spirits. I don't necessarily use the term evil spirits because I don't necessarily feel that's how it works, but we can get unwanted people trying to come through or connect, or energies, not always people's energies. The pumpkins we carve, we hollow out and we let them capture the unwanted spirits, but I like to use pumpkins whole, maybe just taking the top off and placing the candle on top, and then allowing that candle to burn and inviting in the spirit that we want to kind of embody in that pumpkin, I suppose. So I feel in my heart that we can use pumpkins to ward away unwanted spirits. So why can't we use them to call in spirits as well, to bring in that energy? Because if it's got a connection to that kind of portal, that veil thinning, then using the pumpkin to bring in the spirits that we want. So for me, I will get quite a small pumpkin, but I do like a small orange pumpkin, and just take the top off, and then it's placing a short pillar candle into the pumpkin, and then sprinkling some salt for protection, because anything with spirit, it's always good to have that protection there, with some cinnamon, and it makes a lovely crackling sound when it starts to burn down, and the cinnamon's there to invite in any prosperity, any positive messages that any loved ones or spirits want to bring into the space and into that kind of moment. And it's a real nice point to sit and just reflect. I've got some lovely candles, they're about an hour burn, but it can just carve out that time to really sit and ponder. I might journal, I might just put on some music, meditate, and just be present and remember all the loved ones that I've lost in my life, but all that have come before that I haven't known. I think it's probably an underrated part of magic and witchery is that feasting. I like to eat, so I like to indulge in the food. I like to bake bread and have soup and sit with my family, and actually try and share that kind of conversation, I suppose, about talking about loved ones and being present with the loved ones that are still here. At Rogate Pumpkin Patch, obviously Halloween falls in the middle of the school holidays, so they're going to have loads of pumpkins that might still be available at the end, and normally they would give them back to the cattle for eating and put back through the soil, but this year they're going to do an amazing event where it's pumpkin smash. So that will be inviting people to come, smashing up the pumpkins in fun, imaginative, highly messy ways, I would presume, where then that can all go back into the soil, ready for them to plant for the next year. It makes great fertiliser, it's great to pop in your compost bin. It's not great to leave out for wildlife, I will always say that, because it's can be quite harmful for certain animals. But popping it in a compost bin, letting it rot down, putting it on flower beds ready for the next year will help kind of provide extra nutrition. So although in one respect people might see that as being quite wasteful, actually if we've got an abundance of this vegetable, because it does grow so beautifully in our climate, if it's not going to be eaten, rather than allowing it just to rot away, giving it back to the soil and feels so much more special, because it's giving the soil the kind of right environment ready for the next harvest. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And that's what I like about the pumpkin, is that it kind of almost does represent a bit of the wheel. I almost feel as well with the shape of it. I like to get my pumpkins from a local farm, being Rogate, because it's the lands where I now live, and it's where I'm certain some of my ancestors have lived. So it's kind of that land lineage and bloodline connection as well. And this idea that at this time of year, this magic comes to life. There's felt this real kind of empowerment of kind of embracing that we are cyclical beings, that we are here to follow the seasons and live in kind of harmony with nature rather than resisting them. And the more I've kind of opened myself up to that and embraced it, the more slightly weird and unusual things have happened, which has been quite magical, really. It's changed massively how I live now. Even if people aren't necessarily this way inclined, thinking about the seasons and things, it's become a tradition. I like the tradition of it, that people get their pumpkins and carve them and just, yeah, connect. So people might know that they're doing witchcraft, but they are.